Hello and welcome to another episode of Turnbull's Threads. I'm Kathy and I am your host. So this is a channel that talks about fiber arts for the most part, but basically whatever I happen to be making. It does tend to be knit stuff and cross stitch stuff, but if you're interested, feel free to continue watching. So this is actually kind of a special extra episode. So this isn't gonna really talk about the things that I'm working on this time, but I'm gonna do a recap of what I entered into the state fair. So first things first, I entered a bunch of stuff. Most of it was fiber arts, but there were a couple of pictures, and I'm gonna go ahead and try to remember to insert them here. I entered 4 pictures. None of them were selected to be shown at the state fair. So they're now in my office at work, hanging up. Well, on some shelves. Not hanging, supported on shelves. Whatever. So that was how that went. Didn't get any judges' comments. It was just, your stuff is not selected. It's like, okay. It's not really helpful in terms of feedback. But I also entered a bunch of fiber art stuff this year. So we're gonna go through the things that I entered. And the first thing that I entered that you get to see is what I'm actually wearing today. Haha. So what I'm wearing today is the Milkweed top. I enjoyed making it. This was one of my conference knits. And it actually got a ribbon. Looky pretty. So I'll basically go through and say what the thing, try and summarize some of the things that the judges said on their comments, because they do actually give back comment cards. And it actually has a rubric, which would have probably been helpful to look at before entering things. Not that I wasn't going to enter them anyway, so we'll see. So the first one obviously was this. This is the Milkweed Pullover. And they did note that they found loose ends. So when I knit my ends in, so I'll basically, to start a new ball, right? Because you start and end balls, you have to join them together somehow. You can lay them across like this, right? So picking up or like you could literally just add in a ball and have loose ends and then weave them in later. I despise weaving in the ends. So I do all that I can while I'm knitting to avoid doing anything with that later on. So what I typically do is the yarn that I'm working, I'll basically fold the end of it in half like this, so that I end up with a loop, and then this end gets basically knit in here and it's secured, and then you take your new yarn that you're starting and you do this, essentially, so that they're joined together and you end up basically weaving it in as you're knitting it along. And I typically don't go back and fiddle with those ends. Apparently I need to do something about that for these, because they do note that I have average loose ends, so they were able to find the loose ends and therefore they were looking at them very closely. Am I? Maybe if I enter things in next year I might pay a little bit more attention to it. Maybe. We'll see. And then the other things that they said was that the color that I chose, which is this really light blue, does not distract from the design, and that it was a beautiful top, which I agree, and I was quite happy with that. So this one got an honorable mention. Yay! The next thing that I have here that I entered was a quilt that I made. So shows a quilt. Yeah. Yep. It's a pretty small quilt. I did actually hand quilt it, so all of the So the quilting is like the actual sandwiching of the fabrics together. So I did this by hand. So that's all stitched by hand. And then on this one, for the bind off, that was also hand stitched. So that took forever. I'm really proud of how it looks, but yeah, that was not my favorite thing to do on this one. And I literally just started doing a couple of quilts, so I knew that this wasn't, I didn't expect this to do well. I expected there to be a lot more people because there were a lot of categories for quilting, and I expected there were going to be a bunch of people. So I threw it in the hand quilting category because I hand quilted it. They basically gave me an average on it, which, fair, it is average. They did say that it had fun fabric choices, yay. But I needed to improve on the sufficiency, the amount of quilting. It was not sufficient. I don't know about that. I think that that was appropriate, but they said that it wasn't, like, sufficiency of it needed improvement. Who knows? And then the piecing, corners and points match. My corners did not all match. Fair, it did need improvement. The other quilt that I have now that I'm working on, the corners don't match either, so yeah. It's what happens when you're starting it and you're like, I'd rather get the final product than necessarily make it entirely perfect. So that was the quilt that I entered. The next thing that I have here is this guy. So this is Horse Friends. It's a stamped quilt, or stamped cross-stitch piece that I did. And the comments on this particular piece were, my background color comes through in places because my tension was not great on this. So this is a piece that I did on a hoop, and I stretched the hoop, I think, a little bit too much. So my tension, I had tight tension on my stitches and tight tension on the hoop. And so when it came off the hoop, it didn't, like, because I framed this myself, and I did not, like, it's stretched around a piece of cardboard, I believe, but it's not, like, laced or anything, so it's not as tight as it could be, and if it was, you would definitely see more holes in it. But yeah, you can, it's fair. The tension was not great on this one. So I didn't have any matting, which apparently needs improvement. I'm not, I did this myself, I'm not gonna, no. And then, oh no, I think these were, they circled the things that were good and then they underlined the things that were bad. So all cross stitches go the same way. This one, this did not happen. Some of them went different ways. And even tension, it did not have even tension. But they said that the placement and matting, I have no matting, but I did a good job on placing it. So I'm pretty happy with that. And this is actually one that hangs up in my room and will continue to stay in my starting of a gallery wall. The next piece that I have is this guy. So this is one of my kitchen pieces. Another kit, Artiste Kit. They had a couple of notes on it. Things like work is not true in frame. True, it isn't. The anchors here are a little bit close to the edge. And they say it needs to be stretched and blocked, and fair, it probably does. You can see how the stitching has kind of warped the fabric in the center so that it's no longer straight up and down, it's at a slant. Fair point. Am I going to do anything with this? No. It's finished. It's not getting finished. In the future, I don't know. Maybe. I think I didn't choose... So I chose size that kind of works for it, right? So it's like an 11 by 14. It was a common one. It went well with the piece, which is why I used it. But it's not, like, it is just a hair too small. So maybe in the future I will get better at choosing my friends. Potentially. We'll see. Neither of those got ribbons. Now, this next one did get a ribbon. So this is a Swedish weaving blanket. So Swedish weaving, unlike cross stitching where you're going through the fabric and basically you're making an X over it, Swedish weaving, instead of going through the fabric, basically you're going underneath those joins, right? So cross stitch fabric, so Aida, even weave, linen. The way it works is, right, you have warp and weft, and basically the fibers kind of weave into each other, kind of like this, right? And they alternate which way, and you end up with getting like 4 holes, right? So with cross stitch and like hardinger and a lot of your other embroidery things, what you do is you pierce that fabric, right? So you go into the hole and you go around the back and you come out the front. So what you do for Swedish weaving is, instead of going through the hole, what you do is you go into this space here. So where my fabrics cross each other, let's try it on this one. See if I can demonstrate it better. So where my fabrics cross each other, like right here, my ring fingers are crossing each other. Instead of going through the holes that are created around there, what you're doing is you're gonna go slide under the one that's on top, so that your stitches essentially will only be seen from the front. They slide like this. They slide horizontally instead of piercing through. And so when you flip it on the back, let me pull it around. So when you flip it on the back, like, you can see kind of the outline because it's pulled the fabric thin, but like truly, I haven't gone through those holes, right? The fabric is kind of lying on top of whatever you stitch through it. So I know it's called Swedish weaving, and there's another name for it, and I don't remember the name for it. Yeah, blanking. I know there's another name for it, but I know it mostly as Swedish weaving. And I have a book with a bunch of patterns. You do it on monk's cloth for like these Afghans, which is what this is. So this is the Surf's Up Afghan, and I used 2 different types of yarn. So I used a multicolored one and then a solid color one, and then did a sewn finish on the sides and a fringe at the bottom. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah. So a fringe here. So basically you secure the bottom by stitching around it, and then fringe out the bottom so that it looks nice and pretty. So this was my lovely thing, and this one actually placed the best, and I was quite happy. It got 2nd place in its category, and they said that it was a lot to design. I didn't design it, I did follow a pattern, but yeah, it was it's a big pattern. I think there's 3 repeats of the large motif and like 4 of the smaller motif. Nice fringe, nice finish of edges, and a pretty bright pattern. So I was quite happy with that. Didn't expect it. So I am working on another project from the book. This one's going to be more monochromatic, so we'll see how it goes. We'll see if I finish it by the time for State Fair next year, or if it's going to be a longer process. That one did take me forever, because it takes roughly like 30 minutes to just get one thread through the area. And your take, like for the smaller design, that's 3, 6, 9, 12, 13. So that's 13 for that. And then for the larger design, you have like 8 plus 10, 12. I think there was like 15 in that section. So I think it's like a group of 15. So it takes a long time. At a half an hour per row, times repeating, it takes a while. That one took me a couple of years to finish. It's also my first time doing it, so there's also that. Might have had an effect. The next one in my thing was this one. So this was a small. This is the, let's see if I can get my camera to focus on it, maybe. Beep, 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 beep. Ah, there we go. So this is Mystical Dragon by Joan Elliot. It's a smaller pattern, and I did it on a hand-painted cloth, hand-painted Ada. They said interesting. The painted cloth adds a whimsical look, and it was a fun pattern. They liked the pearls and the beads, and the gold thread added to it, and the inside of the frame was finished nicely. So good comments. The other one, so like mine was a super teeny tiny design. I think they went up to like 11 by 14 for this. So much smaller than that. I think the ones that won in that category were probably way bigger than this one. But nice comments. I was glad that I got comments on it. And then the last one that I had in there, which actually won a ribbon. Yay! So I got 3rd place for this. So this is the Pansy, I want to say, by Mill Hill. It's a Mill Hill kit. It's a perforated paper with beading, and then I finished it off with some felt on the back and a magnet. So they said, cute idea for a magnet, nice job. No other comments, so pretty happy with that. This was actually a really fun one to do up pretty fast. So there's that. So that covers everything except my knitting. So the rest of this is going to be knitting. So if you're not interested in watching me talk about knitting, feel free to leave now. Otherwise, you get to suffer through my long set of things. Okay, so the first thing that I have here is this one. So this was a test knit for that I talked about earlier. So it's a mohair pullover, has some lace details on the sleeves, and the front is the thing that I've been so enthused about. So it involves basically making the stitches kind of look like they're floating in the air, because what you do is you knit with the mohair and then you actually knit with sewing thread, bind off with the mohair, and then the bind off technique to do kind of those bands is explained by Jennifer Estep, who did this pattern. So this is Summer Love sweater. It's in a mohair and it gets finished off with some like fingering weight yarn. They said that I had loose ends. So they did find my loose ends. You can actually see one here, like there, right there, loose end. not woven in very well. And they did like that my seams were good. So I had average on my uniformity of stitches. You can tell that in my thread sections, they're not quite as uniform as my other sections are. I had loose ends, and then that was kind of average. They did say, though, that it was bright, airy, and beautiful. So whoever wrote that, thank you. Thank you for that compliment. That made me happy. The next one that I have is, let's see if I can find the appropriate thing. Okay. So the next one I have is this one. So this is a brioche knit hat. And it's also a test knit. I don't remember the name. I will try and remember to put all of the names. I'll just put the names of the patterns in my notes section, not necessarily the yarns, because I may or may not have written those down. But it's a really pretty brioche hat. As I was knitting it, I noted that some of my base color and my bright color kind of go together a little bit in certain areas, but such is life. They said that there's fuzzing and pilling noted, which yes, it did have some of that. I had, when I blocked it, it blocked a little bit bigger than I wanted it, so I think I redid it to try and get it to shrink a little bit, and what I did to try and shrink it did cause a little bit of pilling. So it's a little fuzzy, there's some pilling. They could find the loose ends again. You can see one there. But they did say great brioche, so I was pretty happy with that, especially since this was my first brioche project. So I learned how to brioche, and at the same time as I learned how to brioche, I also learned how to cross brioche stitches, which was maybe not the best thing to do on your first brioche project. Possibly. Such is life. Let's see. The next one that I have is this guy. So this is a Carlsbad Cavern hat from the Knitting the National Parks. They did note that it was super soft, well done, thank you. But the color that I used kind of hid the structure of the pattern. They did find loose ends, and they felt that the bottom band was distorted, so it's not stretchier than it should be. At least I think that's, pretty sure this is the right one. So mostly fair points. I think that was this one, unless this was. This is the problem of entering so many things. You're like, I think this is the right one. Or maybe it's not. That might be the wrong. Oh, that's the wrong one. This is the right notes for this one. They had the same comment about the color distracting from the pattern. I don't know. I mean, yes, you would see it better on a solid color, but I don't know that I would agree with that one. What am I to say? They did say that the ribbing was overblocked. They did say cute hat though. And that the ribbing at the hole at the top was not closed. So it is closed, it's just not perfectly closed, so you can like see through it. So I guess that's what they're talking about. I think when I blocked it, it stretched it out a little bit. because I did block it fairly aggressively on this one because it was smaller. And I think, so I did block it fairly aggressively and the yarn behaved differently. So this was a cash merino essentially yarn, which doesn't have as much bounce back as my wool does. So when I blocked it, I think I accidentally over blocked it, and it, because of the way that the yarn was, it doesn't bounce back really well. Such is life. Let's see. This next one is, let me see if I can find things that are correct. Hopefully I have all of them with me. There's also that. We'll see if I got the right ones. I think I have, yes. I found the ones for these. It helps if they put the numbers on it because I took the tags off and I don't remember the numbers. So they said wonderful socks, which thank you. But that there were signs of wear and pilling, and yes, there are signs of wear because I entered things that I actually had worn and used. Shocker. So I guess next year, if I enter things, I can't wear them beforehand because it shows up. So these are from the 52 Weeks of Socks. It's got a cable pattern on it. They're super soft alpaca wool, alpaca yarn socks, super soft. They do say that they could find loose ends. Again, I don't think that they could. No, I don't think they could. They just circled it again. I wonder about that. Maybe they did, but whatever. Does have pilling and signs of wear, and they said again that they don't like the color because it distracts from the pattern. I disagree. I respectfully disagree. I enjoy the color. I don't think that it distracts from the pattern. You can still see the pattern on it. It's very woven. It's subtle. Based on a lot of these comments, I'm like, so you only really want solid color things if it has any type of knitting pattern on it. Otherwise, you're like, no, detracts from the pattern. How dare you? And even when it is a solid color, if it is not the right solid color, it detracts from the pattern. How dare you? Don't agree. But it's beside the point. I wasn't the one judging. Oh man. The next one I had is this guy. And this one actually got a ribbon. So this was my lacework item. This is Olympia, once again from the 52 weeks through the national parks. They did say that they could find a loose end, and that my uniformity of stitches was not perfect. Probably true. But other than that, the only thing they had to say was, cute hat, great job. So quite happy. It even managed to win a 3rd place. Man, talking is hard. Let's see, the next thing. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. Nope. Where is it? It would help if I knew exactly which ones these were. I know this one, they had a bunch of comments. They were not happy with this one, so I'll find that one. So this one, it's a child's cardigan. They did know this one has some pretty obvious ends that were not woven in very well. But when I did it, only the top button had been buttoned up. I submitted it so the top button was buttoned up, and then the other 4 buttons were loose. And so the buttonholes are made by basically creating a chain of stitches at the very edge. So it is very close to the edge where you have the holes where the buttons go in. So yes, it was hard, but their comment was 4 buttons, 1 buttonhole ? And I was like, like, they're all made literally the same way. So you weren't able to find that. Okay. So there's that. So they weren't happy with that. They also didn't like that every other row had twisted stitches. Which is true. They do have twisted stitches. This was before I figured out that... So I had started looking on how you're supposed to properly knit, and was changing up my knitting style, and then discovered that when I knit flat, I knit, because I purl differently, I have to knit differently. So I can't go in the front, I have to go in through the back loop. So I knit through the back loop normally in order to get my stitches to lay flat on stockinette looking backwards and forwards. In the round, I'll go through the forward loop because that one you're just going around in circles, and so you don't have the issue that you have when you're turning your work back and forth. So yes, that did happen. They also said that I had no give. True, my cast off was not great. But my seams were good, well done, and they had distraction of stitches on buttonhole seam. I think that those were the buttonholes that they couldn't figure out, so they weren't happy about that. Yeah. So when you enter things into the state fair, do realize that the people who are judging you are people, so they may not get everything, and because you're not there to explain anything, they can't ask any questions. They're just getting the piece. Some things are valid, some things may not be correct. They may not be able to figure out the thing that you did. It is a possibility. The next thing that I have is this one. So this guy is the Matterhorn cowl, and I know I've shown this before. So it's got a bunch of cables. I blocked it. They stated that my design color use did not distract from the pattern, so they were happy with this one. It is a solid color. They did say that I have a noticeable join, which, where is my join? I think it's here, which, because I do the double thing, I think you can see it whenever you look for it on there. And that it is well secured. You couldn't find any knots or loose ends, which thankfully, no, you couldn't. And then it's a beautiful cowl. And then this one was also one of those that got an honorable mention. Yay! So pretty happy with that. It was a fun cowl. I have yet to use it. It's starting to turn into fall, so I will get to use that probably pretty soon, which will make me happy. The next one I think is So once again, they had some comments where I was like, I don't think so. So this is the translation shawl. So what it does is it transitions from one color up into another color. So I used, 3 different colors in order to create this. It's a lace weight, and then you bind off with like a picot bind off and put a bead on the end. So they noted that the top edge is tight for casting my cast on edge, which it is a little bit tight, but it's supposed to be a crescent shawl, so I don't necessarily truly agree with that one. It's a tab cast on. The cast on really isn't that tight. They said that my loose ends were all very well hidden. They didn't like my colors on this one, so they didn't like that translation. They thought that was color pooling and not a deliberate choice, and that it hid the pattern, which I respectfully disagree with. I think this is beautiful, and did exactly what I wanted it to do, because I wanted it to have a transition from one color into the other, kind of a spring change, and so I'm very happy with it. And they didn't like the uniformity of my stitches. They thought they weren't quite uniform. I don't know. Maybe. This one I did end up having to do a bunch of like back stitching, because I would get the row wrong and end up with a wrong number at the end. It took me a while. It was fun to knit, but you didn't get into a pattern because you kept switching every row. So that's the translation shawl. And my last shawl is this one. I don't remember the name of it. So this is a one color. And this is my final ribbon. So this one got 3rd place, yay. They called it a beautiful shawl. Didn't like the color again. Sensing a theme. They think that the color detracts from the pattern, so it has like areas of garter stitch, which is you knit backwards and forwards, and then areas of a what is it? It's not, I don't think it's a linen stitch, but it's something very similar to that, where you knit and then slide over every other one, so you end up with like different patterns in there. It does have a tight top edge, which I agree, it does have a tight top edge. The cast on that I used was not very stretchy, and it's even less stretchy because this is silk. So the silk, I don't know where it's ending. My thing is saying 0 minutes, so I think I'm about to die. Okay, so let's restart this one. So this is a shawl from designed by a freak pattern from Darn Good Yarns. And this is my final 3rd place. Yay! And this one, they do say beautiful shawl on it. They do note that the top edge is tight, so it's not a great cast on edge, and not true. I didn't do a stretchy one. It's silk. It's done in a silk yarn, and when it blocked out, I did block it a bit wider. It's very drapey and lovely in that respect, but it doesn't have any give. So unlike my like wool, or if you were using acrylic yarn where you have a little bit of give, this doesn't. So if you're doing it, you kind of really need to do a stretchy cast on, just so that it'll have a little bit of give to it. They did not like my colors again. So you can see it's a multicolored yarn. They don't like that there. They said it hides the pattern. There's pooling. I wanted there to be pooling. Like that's part of the point of it. I don't want it to be uniform. Why would... Anyways, so like I don't want it. I wanted the pooling. I want it to do the neat, cool stripes stuff, like design choice, but they don't like that. So notes for people who are doing fair entries, like you might have things like that where people are like, no, I despise anything that is multicolored, essentially. That's what I'm getting from this. They don't like multicolored yarn. If you do that, no. So that was that one. And then the next one that I had was a scarf. So this is my scarf. They first said that fuzzing pilling is noted. It is a little bit fuzzy. I agree with that. The use of color hides the design. It's a fairly basic design. It's basically diagonals. You can't super see it well because it is a dark yarn. I like the subtleness of that. Apparently they don't. Once again, color and pattern, they're very specific on what they want to see, I think. So what I would wear, which is like, I'm knitting this for me, so I'm going to knit it for what I want, not necessarily to win things at the fair. So I'm going to take most of those with a grain of salt. I might adjust what I enter next year and like try and the things that I want to knit, that I do knit, that are lighter in color or like might follow the things that they like. I might enter those over something in the same category that might not fall in there. So that might be how I go about it. But I'm gonna knit what I wanna wear, what I'm going to use, not for, or as gifts, not for state fair requirements. They do note that one edge is more stretchy than the other. True. My cast on, I think, was tighter than my bind off, or no, my bind off was tighter than my cast on, and so it doesn't stretch as much as the other one does. And so the ends end up being a little bit wider than the body of the yarn or the scarf because of how things ended. And then they said wrong class, 2 yarns held together. And once again, I get to respectfully disagree because I knit this, so I know that it is not 2 yarns. It was a novelty yarn. So the novelty yarn, they plied basically a ribbon along with the yarn when they were doing it. So it looks like you held 2 yarns together. You didn't. You held 1 yarn. So once again, like these are people who are judging you. So they might not get all of your things just right. I was very amused. I was like, no. This was your yarn. I knit that. I did not hold 2 yarns together. So that's wrong. And then the next thing that I knit, I think it's which one is it? I think maybe this one might be, because I only have 2 left unless I didn't. Oh yes, I have this one. I don't have the notes. I don't know where I put them. I ended up taking this one out on the other one, before the other one, so it might be floating around somewhere. I will probably get rid of these at some point, but maybe not before next year. That way I have the rubric so I can do it properly. They did think that this was adorable. My things were on securely, but there wasn't like, there's some somewhat obvious flaws in certain areas, and he is rather floppy. And then the second to last one, because I have to go grab the blanket, which is the last one that I have entered. So this one is my cardigan. So this was the Lazy Cat cardigan by Veronika Lindberg. It's a fisherman's rib, first time doing fisherman's rib. Actually really enjoyed it. Would do it again in a pattern. I need to find a pattern for it, but I actually really do love the fisherman's rib. Had a very interesting construction design. You went from the bottom, like you knit it flat bottom up and then separated up top. Sewed things together, added sleeves, added collar, and added a button band on there. I haven't added the snaps to the button band. That's on my to-do list. So yes, I entered something that wasn't fully finished. I do want to wear this probably at work. This might be this will either be a home comfy thing or a work thing, but love it. It's super soft. They said, well done. They say that my bottom band had distortion. Oh, yeah, there is some distortion where I added the button band, so fair. They did find loose ends again. The seams are well done. Apparently I do well with seams, I just don't do well with my loose ends. And then they didn't like the color because it is a very dark color. And then you have the fisherman's rib, which ends up being more of like a texture on this one. And yes, if you had a lighter colored yarn, it would show up a little bit better, but I wanted a subtle thing and I wanted a dark throw, so it's dark. And then, give me a second, I'll get my blanket. This will be the last thing. So, my last thing, which is very fall and appropriate for this season, is this one. And I do not remember what the name of the blanket is, but it's a fun blanket, has changes in texture and color. So you do a little bit of color work, and a bunch of color changes. And so on there, they noted that there is some pilling. There probably is. They found woven ends sticking out, probably. And then for carrying my yarn up, because I didn't want to weave in a bunch of ends, what I did was I basically carried it up the side on one side. They noted that you can view it on the edges, it's visible. True. So they weren't particularly happy with those things, so it did not get very well on their fair points, but they did note that there was some beautiful stitch work on it, so thank you. So those are all of the things that I entered in the fair, and those were the kind of comments that I got back from the judges. As you can see, when I read them, it took a little while, right? So I have found this out about myself in terms of criticism. I have to read it, get angry about it, especially if it's something that I'm like, that was like, no, you're wrong, and I know you're wrong. Take some time, let it go through, and then come back and be like, okay, some of this is valid, some of it is not, and you know what is not, but some of this is valid, and you should take it as valid. But I do need like a little bit of a cool off. Like I have to read it, feel hurt, feel mad, feel annoyed, and then come back and be like, okay, fair. I don't agree with this point. I do agree with that point. That one was valid. I should do that in the future. Will I do that in the future? Yeah, depends. Depends on what it is. But, so I think with pretty much everything that I entered, they all tend to have some positive feedback for you. So at least my experience with the state fair and the judging is they do have positive feedback, and they do try and like make it a positive experience for you. They do have negative feedback, and they do write that down. So if you do not like criticism, don't enter stuff in the state fair. Like, it is a competition, so they are going to actually give you feedback on it. I will probably enter again next year. If you enjoyed watching the recap, I will probably end up doing this again next year. We'll see. But if your state fair has not happened yet, I will encourage you that as long as you're okay with getting criticism, go ahead and enter it. It's fun. Some of the pieces I entered basically so that, because they display all of the pieces. So, like, and if there's nothing to display, eventually they're going to get rid of those categories, and you don't want them to get rid of the categories. Because you want to have people be able to show the things that they're making, right? So, if you're okay with getting criticism and you have stuff, even if it's not great, like this, like, there are obvious flaws in this. It's not perfect. Those are things to enter, right? So people get a chance to see kind of the width and breadth of the things that you can enter. And maybe someone will see your piece and be like, oh, I love that. I want to do something like that. Let me try to make that. And you can inspire other people to get out there and make things. That was part of the reason why I entered some of this stuff. Because, like, love this, but I knew it wasn't gonna win anything. Likewise with my quilt. Like, I was like, the piece, like, the points don't match. You can see the yarn traveling up the side on this one. Like, there are very obvious flaws. Unless nobody else enters into this particular category, there's no way I'm winning anything. But they were displayed, right? They were out there. People could go and look at them and see that you don't have to have perfect pieces to do a craft, right? You don't have to be perfect. As, who is it? Nora from aka Nora Knits. She has this line that she has with every one of her videos going, the thing that makes things, the imperfections make it perfectly handmade. And that's true, right? There are going to be imperfections. This is made by a person. It's not a machine. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly the same every time. So now that I'm on my soapbox, let me get off it. So just encourage someone, if your state fair hasn't come up, or if you're thinking about entering next year, go ahead and do it. It's fun. You do have to be able to accept criticism, but it's fun. It's great. It gives other people an opportunity to see various ranges and things that you can do with this craft that they may not know that you can do. So with that, my state fair wrap up is done. If you enjoyed this or enjoyed this type of video, feel free to comment, subscribe, like below in the realm of YouTube. I'm going to be doing my normal video sometime soon. Hopefully this weekend I'll get around to it, or before this weekend, we'll see. An update on kind of what I've been stitching on in the last month and a half, almost 2 months now. And other than that, have a great day, have a great evening, have a great weekend. And I hope to see you here again soon. Bye!